Hey everybody, it is Scribelight. With me as always is the Ranting Monkey. Hello, Monkey.
Hello.
We are here to talk about the best movie that has ever been made, The Hunt for Red October. Now, I have a deep, deep love for this film, as I have mentioned more than a few times on the Lords of the Night stream. It was to understand why I love The Hunt for Red October, you have to understand that one of the very first audiobooks I ever had as a kid was something called The Cardinal of the Kremlin, which was a Tom Clancy novel. And I had that before The Hunt for Red October became a movie, or I saw it as a movie. And the way Tom Clancy told stories, at least in the olden days, his later novels kind of went off the deep end. But as a kid, they challenged me to understand global political thinking and intrigue and all types. I mean, spy and espionage in sort of a real world context. And so when I saw The Hunt for Red October, and we'll get into this more as we go on. Even today, even I watched it today, it doesn't. I mean, it has to provide a lot of exposition in places, but as far as what's going on and the motivations and the intrigues between the powers that be in this movie, I don't feel like it leads the audience around by the nose. I feel like it treats the audience relatively well insofar as intellectual respect. Now, maybe Monkey will disagree with me on that. We'll go over that. Now, Monkey, did you ever see this? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
But before we begin, I just to let the audience know, I know this is Scribe's favorite movie, and I tried really, really hard to find things to fuck with him about it. This movie, it really is just such a good movie. I have my personal favorite is not this, but this is definitely one of my favorite movies. And as I watched it today, I remembered why. I don't like Alec Baldwin in this role. I know you do.
Mm-hmm.
Which we can get to. But other than that, other than his casting, there's nothing about this movie I don't like. One of my favorite characters in this movie, God, what the hell's his name? Played by Sam Neill.
Oh, Vasily. Oh fuck, what was his last name? Oh, see, I know this. I love this movie, but the specific names of people, they don't say them that often. But his first name is Vasily. I'll look it up.
Yeah, he's Raykov's. Is that no?
No, Ramius.
Ramius, thank you. I'm mixing his two names together. Ramius, it's his second in command, and he's in a lot of movies. I don't think I've ever seen him actually as the star in a movie before, but I love him as an actor.
Vasily Borodin.
Okay. But also Jonesy is great. The captain of the Dallas, I forget his name. He's fucking awesome. The performances in this movie are also just amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Seriously, guys, I wanted to fuck with Scribe and I couldn't because the movie is just too good.
So this movie came out in, what was it, 1990? As I suddenly closed the window, I didn't mean to. Let's see. Well, the novel was written in 1984, so the Cold War was still at its peak, so to speak. Now, the movie came out in 1990 after Perestroika and all sort of the peace started to settle and the fall of the wall. I think, when did the wall fall? Oh, God, I forget what it was. Anyway, the Soviet Union was not in the best of shape coming up to 1990. And so there was a little bit of tension about releasing this movie because, you know, it might harm the image or something, or, you know, sort of
reopen old wounds.
Yeah, reopen old wounds, so to speak. So they made sure to, at the beginning of the film, which is one of the most mysterious openings to a film I can remember seeing, is that it's got this little text display saying, you know, in the was the fall of 1984, you know, the Soviet submarine Red October went missing. None of what you're about to see, according to both governments, nothing of what you're about to see ever happened. And it's like, ooh, I mean, it was sort of, I had an impression when I was younger, and I felt it later on in life, that this was sort of my first Blair Witch moment of, is this real? Because as a kid, I had no idea. I mean, it just seemed so plausible the way that it hashed out. And I couldn't say reading it because I didn't know about the novel so much at that point. I didn't know. I mean, I had the Cardinal of the Kremlin audiobook, and I knew that this was based on a book by Tom Clancy, but I was young enough to sort of not be able to tell if this was like a sort of a documentary type thing or something. So I wasn't sure. But anyway, yeah, I mean, and it was it's such a time capsule of global tensions watching this movie, because the themes and the risks and the tension about the sort of gamesmanship, and that's one of the words I'm probably going to use a lot in this review, is gamesmanship. Not only between nations but also between individuals is a big part of how this movie operates. And you just get a little bit of a taste of just how fine a line we were walking as a country against Russia for so long during the Cold War. It wouldn't take much to cause a catastrophe. So that's not dwelled on too much here, but it's hinted at quite heavily in several places. So rather than just blab on about it, let's just get into it. So yeah, we had the. Oh, did you have anything you wanted to say before we get into the deal?
Nope. I'm ready to go.
All right. So this was directed by John McTiernan. John McTiernan. Let me make sure I have his filmography up. So he did.
Yep. Yes. Wait, I do. I do have one criticism of this movie. The CGI effects suck. They absolutely suck.
It's not CGI. It's composited. It's some animation, but most of it was done with models in smoky air.
No, I'm not talking about like the subs. I'm talking about specifically the torpedoes.
Yeah, the torpedoes and the countermeasures are the worst visual part of the film. For the time, this is before CGI. So for the time, that is the least of my complaints about this film.
The original Death Star blowing up looked more realistic. That's all I'm saying.
All right. Well, John McTiernan has a very rich portfolio prior to The Hunt for Red October, because he was the director of Predator. He was the director of Die Hard. He would go on to be the director of Die Hard with a Vengeance. And one of the little-known but excellent Sean Connery films that people never talk about, Medicine Man, which is a movie I am going to bring up at some point in our series here, because that is a movie that people need to see. It is awesome. Have you seen Medicine Man?
I don't know if I have.
Oh, okay.
I remember when it came out, but I don't remember if I ever saw it.
Well, I won't go into it now, but it is a film that if you have not seen it, I highly recommend it. We'll get that in a future episode. In any case, he has John McTiernan has a pedigree for really good action movies. But the thing about Hunt for Red October, as compared to most of the movies that he's done prior to that and afterwards, is that it's smart and not just a dumb action movie. Not to say that Die Hard was a dumb action movie, but it relied heavily on action over substance in a lot of places. Whereas The Hunt for October is really dependent on the audience following along with the intrigue and the chain of logic between different characters with different motivations. And that is interesting to me. But anyway, so we open up with a little heading telling us that this story, giving us the impression this story actually happened, but it's like top secret or something. It's set in the 80s. And we open up on Sean Connery's eyes. These tired, hard, chiseled out of like granite eyes looking off into the distance. And it's Sean Connery standing with Sam Neill. And let me just take a quick to rattle off some of the names in this movie. You got Sean Connery, Sam Neill, Tim Curry, Alec Baldwin, Scott Glenn, James Earl Jones, Fred Thompson, Jeffrey Jones. There's just a whole raft of people in here who are just excellent actors. And it's amazing, and they all really bring it together. Anyway, so Sean Connery and Sam Neill are standing on the conning tower of this gigantic submarine. And they go on in the film to later describe it as about the size of a World War II aircraft carrier. It's so big. And they're pulling out of the Polyarny Inlet, which is a location off of, in Russia, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, at a naval yard. And so the big reveal is that we don't know they're standing on a submarine right at first until the camera pulls away. And there's not much conversation. It's a very quiet, very sort of reflective conversation between the two about how cold it is and that they have to get underway. And then we reveal the giant submarine, the music starts, and we get into this. I just love the soundtrack to this is also really good. The Russian national anthem that's playing, the sort of Russian music. And I've heard from someone who's from Russia that it's awful because it's English people singing Russian words with an English accent. So they're like, this sounds horrible, but I don't know the difference, so it sounds all great to me. And then we get a montage of sort of our main protagonist. We cut to an office and we're sort of sweeping over his desk and all his books and all these things about naval research and submarines and stuff like that. And we're being slowly introduced to Jack Ryan, who's played by Alec Baldwin. So let's get the Alec Baldwin question out of the way first. The reason I like Alec Baldwin in this role is because the character is meant to be he is a military veteran of a sort, but he's also been injured to the point where he's just now an analyst. He's a paper pusher. Of all the characters in this movie, and I mean all of them, Alec Baldwin is the most fresh-faced, baby-faced looking guy amongst all these hardened, seafaring whatevers. So the fact that he's supposed to be the underdog, the fact that he's supposed to be underestimated, especially by those general guys in the briefing room, his youthful appearance, his the easy ability to underestimate his skills as a field agent, so to speak, I think do credit to the character in this film. What say you?
Well, you and I have discussed this before, and you said that Jack Ryan, as you understood, shouldn't be an action star, and that's why you didn't like Harrison Ford for this role. I think Alec Baldwin looks way too young. He's supposed to be a doctor at this point, and not a medical doctor, guys. He's a I don't know if they ever actually say what his doctorate's in, but he has a doctorate. And he's also supposed to by this time have written a book as a CIA analyst.
Yeah.
I think he could have been older without making him, too grizzled. At the time, Harrison Ford, I mean, yeah, he was already getting older, but he wasn't that old. And they did originally offer him the part. He turned it down. I don't think Alec Baldwin fits the character very well. He's a little too fresh-faced for me.
Well,
I think he did a decent job. Don't get me wrong. He did a good job acting in it, but I think he should have been a little older, actually.
Well, my first exposure to any representation of Jack Ryan as a character was Alec Baldwin. So, because Hunt for October was the first movie I saw, and so that was sort of the template, and that kind of
wasn't it the first of the movies?
So far as I know, this is the first of Tom Clancy's novels that was ever turned into a film. Yes.
Yeah.
So that kind of set the standard. And we could talk about the other Jack Ryan movies in the future or something. I didn't have a huge problem with Harrison Ford as things went on in some places, but the look of this character that I could easily find myself underestimating the capabilities of made for the better portrayal, I thought, of what they were trying to go for, and especially what the character is as he's described in some of the novels. That was my impression. Anyway, so we get to see Jack Ryan. We get to see his little girl who's holding a teddy bear. This is a very minor plot point that comes in later, where the teddy bear's name is Stanley, and Stanley's lonely. And then for about 5 seconds, we see Gates McFadden, Dr. Crusher from Next Generation, as Caroline Ryan, his wife, who has a British accent in this because he's coming from London. He's flying out of London to go to Virginia.
Her accent's only there for like half a line.
Yeah,
not there the whole time.
But then she's not in the movie for more than like literally. I think I counted up. It was like 4 seconds.
Yeah,
she's not there for. Yeah,
she's got like 6 lines. 2 of them are done with a British accent, and the others aren't.
Yeah, it's really weird, and I always thought it was kind of odd to see her in that movie and then never see her again. It was just, I'm sure there's probably some footage on the cutting room floor somewhere of extra lines, but then she wasn't really part of the story either. So,
and I watched this, guys, because I thought I had this on DVD, and if I do, I just can't find it. So I watched it on Amazon today. For the record, Amazon Prime is the best mistake I ever made. Just want to throw that out there. But they do this thing while you're watching. If you hover over the screen, it pops up different facts and stuff. And yeah, apparently there was like 3 times as much stuff with her in it, and they just cut it all. Yeah. Probably because it didn't matter.
Yeah, it was just for pacing or something. But so he heads off. He gets on a plane. We get a little scene that's. I gotta say, like, there's a lot of scenes that I'm just gonna mention really quickly and just kind of wash over. But
sure,
every scene in this movie means something. It all matters. It's such a tight script and such a tight story. Nothing is really set aside as meaningless. I mean, every time we zero in on a character or an event, it is relevant. Either to the overall story or to the importance of the character's motivations. So, and that's my observation. What do you think, Monkey?
I disagree on one point.
Okay.
There's a scene, and if you want to wait, we can get back to it in a little bit, but there's a scene where they're coming out of the trench. And they had to switch to their regular propulsion system. You know what? Let's...
We'll get there.
We'll get back to this. Let's set up the actual, because I don't want to get that far ahead of us.
Okay, so Jack Ryan's on a plane from London to the U.S. A stewardess comes along and says he should try to get some sleep, and he says that he can't sleep because of turbulence. Now, I always found it a little odd that he had to explain to the stewardess what turbulence was, because she's like, "I'm sorry," and he goes very scientific into what turbulence is, and I'm just kind of like, okay, but this is one of, real quick. This is one of several little subtle hints as to Jack Ryan's past, which we learn about later, but that are relevant, kind of. I mean, they're relevant in sort of fleshing out the character's hesitation in putting himself into dangerous situations, but we'll get there.
I think that scene actually does 2 things. One, it starts to set up his backstory. And 2, it tells us about him as a person, that he didn't understand what she meant, because he is an analyst. He's a geek. He sits behind a desk pushing papers. He's not.
True. Yeah.
So I forgive that one, because that's how I took it. Is not that she didn't understand what turbulence is. He didn't understand why she was asking.
Okay.
And so he went to his fallback,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So then Jack lands in, I assume, Virginia. He gets taken immediately to the CIA because that's where he was going. And he meets with James Earl Jones, who is like the only Admiral Greer. Again, for all the characters, I read and or listened to several Tom Clancy books after seeing this film. So forever in my mind, these characters are branded with these actors' faces. So James Earl Jones is the only Admiral Greer, as far as I'm concerned. He's been played by other people in other films. I think he was still Admiral Greer in at least 1 or 2 of the other Harrison Ford movies. So
he was in. I'm pretty sure he was in both Clear and Present Danger and Patriot Games.
Yeah. Okay. So James Earl Jones is Admiral Greer, and he sits down with Jack, and he's like, "What got you on a plane in the middle of the night?" And Jack pulls out these reconnaissance photos, or like spy photos, basically, of this giant submarine called the Red October, and that it's something that the Soviets are working on, but there's a particular feature about this submarine that they can't figure out, and that's these doors, or these little slits or whatever, on both ends of the submarine on what's the word I'm looking for? Symmetrical sides of the sub.
Oh yeah,
and so they're like, what are they, like missile doors or something? They don't know at that point, at least. And so Jack asks Admiral Greer. Sorry, go ahead.
Real quick, one of the things they point out is with the positioning and everything, they couldn't be missile doors. Jack does bring it up when he goes to show somebody the photos, which we'll get to in a second, that maybe maybe they could launch an ICBM horizontally. And like, yeah, but why?
Yeah, why would you?
Why would you? So yeah, pretty much they know it's not anything to do with missiles. They just can't figure out what the fuck it actually is.
Yeah. And so Jack asks Admiral Greer if he can take these photos to a guy named Skip Tyler, who is a former sub driver who lost his leg in a car accident. And he's like, sure. And then Admiral Greer immediately picks up a phone and calls for a car to take him immediately to Skip Tyler. And Jack's like, what's the rush? And he's like, the Red October just pulled out of Polyarny Idlet earlier this morning. So it's on the move. Something about this ship that they don't understand, and the ship's on the move. Then we cut to one of the best characters in this movie, Seaman Jones.
I love Jonesy.
Jonesy is, so let's see, I forget the name of the guy who played him because I'm just where is he?
Now, but while you're looking up his name,
Courtney B. Vance. Courtney B. Vance.
I should hate this character. Because they did something with him I hate. Just because of he's the sonar operator. And because of that, they make him this sound guy.
Yes.
He loves music. He actually caused an incident once because he was playing music on the sub. I hate when they do that with somebody where because they have a job, they make them all about that. I don't know too many people. The only people I know like that in real life are EMTs, because for some reason that's all EMTs will talk about if you know them. But most people, this is my job, and then this is how I am in the rest of life. So I should hate this character because they did that to him. But he makes it work so well. The performance really sells it.
Hey, Gabrielle's in the chat. Hey, Gabrielle. Baldwin's attempt to speak Russian in this movie is pretty funny. Such a thick American accent. Yeah, we'll talk about the Russian in this movie really soon, because we get to that where they do a little artistic conceit to sort of solve that problem for most of the movie. Yes. So Seaman Jones, Courtney B. Vance, who would later go on to play the prosecutor in Law and Order, which was it, Criminal Intent? Anyway, yeah, he's had a long and storied career. But in this particular role, this is the first time I think I ever saw him, and he's perfect. The performance is perfect. He's so charismatic. He's so cool. He's so down on it. So he's sitting there and he's sort of showing a greenhorn how to use the sonar array. And there's some chit chat. There's a really great little scene between him and one of the other officers about the time that he was playing opera music on the submarine, and then all these other sonar emplacements around the planet basically started hearing opera music because he was playing it so loud or something. Now, I had a question for you, Monkey, and just to maybe as we go along, maybe there's some specific instances, but given that you're a Navy brat, how out of touch was the naval performance here as compared to reality or your experience?
I've never been on a sub to see how that culture is.
Okay.
To know if it's any different. If this was on a ship, they run it rather tight, and part of that is yes, the situation that they're in, but they seem very uptight for sailors.
Okay.
And that's not to be mean. Sailors are generally more laid back. Even your captains, I mean, they make jokes and have fun. It just seemed very, very uptight, which I think they probably did to be respectful.
Yeah.
And sailors would swear a whole lot more. They would.
So Seaman Jones is on the other main submarine in this movie called the USS Dallas. This is the American submarine. And as they're sitting there sort of yapping along, they suddenly get a sonar contact. And they identify it as a Russian sub, but one that they don't haven't identified before. And they call the captain over. The captain, played by Scott Glenn, to, as far as I'm concerned, pitch perfection of the super duper professional, ornery sub captain. And he just does a great job. If you don't know who Scott Glenn is, if you've ever seen The Right Stuff, if you've watched any of the Daredevil Netflix stuff and know who the character of Stick is, that's Scott Glenn, but obviously much younger here. So they make a contact with this Russian submarine they haven't identified before. And as they're sort of trying to figure out what this Russian sub is doing there, that's when we cut over to the Red October itself. And we get to see our Captain Marco Ramius in action. Now, at this part of the movie, very, very briefly, all the characters are speaking Russian. Mm-hmm. Sean Connery, Sam Neill, all the crew and everything, they're all speaking Russian to each other. And so Sean Connery, we know something's up. We just don't know what it is yet. So he comes down to his office after he's told that political officer Putin, which I thought was hilarious.
I love that his name's Putin.
Yeah, obviously, yeah, Vladimir Putin was not anything the figure back then when this movie was made as he is now, but that his name was Putin is just sort of an anachronism of humor there. But anyway, so Sam Neill tells Sean Connery that political officer Putin is in your quarters to open up our orders for our mission. And so Sean Connery goes down to his office, and there's the guy sitting there, very smug, and he's reading from this book in regards to, well, we find out later that it's I believe it was a book by Robert Oppenheimer talking about the creation of the nuclear bomb and all that fun stuff. But the guy's quoting from this book, and as he's reading from the book, the camera zooms in up to his mouth as he's speaking Russian. And as soon as he gets to the word Armageddon, everything after that as the camera swoops back is in English. And this was a conceit by the filmmakers in order to kind of save the movie from being, well, I don't know. I would have preferred if it was all in Russian, but at the same time, you've got a bunch of actors who are, none of them are Russian, trying to speak Russian lines for an entire movie. And, you know, Americans hate subtitles, apparently. So they did this to sort of ease the audience both into, we're still talking Russian, it's just that we're transitioning into English now.
I am one of those people who hates subtitles. If I'm watching an American movie, I want to see it in English.
Okay.
If I'm watching a foreign film, that's fine. But I love the way they did it in this movie. And I was unaware. Again, this is one of those trivia things that I picked up on the Amazon thing. One of the reasons they did it on that word is Armageddon is the same in English as it is in Russian.
Yep.
And it's just pronounced different. So it was the perfect place to do it, which most people who watched the movie probably had no fucking idea even happened.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate it because, yeah, I don't want to read my fucking movies.
All right. Well, either way, I don't mind it in the long scope of things, but generally speaking, if I can see it in the original language. But in this case, I completely understand why they did it. And it was a very smooth and artful way to get from one to the other without any kind of weird mechanism or something.
Yeah, because you didn't have, one of the things that it really allowed them to do too is everybody was allowed to speak in their native accent. Very few people even tried a Russian accent here. Yeah,
it's true. And at one point in particular, to the detriment of my own understanding of what the hell was going on when I was younger, but we'll get to that too. So Marco Ramius and the political officer sitting there, and they're getting ready to unlock their orders from this safe because they've been sealed up. And so both guys have a key which unlocks the safe. Not only that, but each of these keys is necessary in order to launch the nuclear missiles on the ship. You know, so there's a two-man rule for any nuclear missile launch. So they open up the safe. Ramius takes out the orders. He barely looks at them because he knows they don't matter. We'll find out in a second. Hands them to the guy. The guy opens them up and says, oh, we're supposed to test out the new silent drive, the Caterpillar drive. And we find out more about what that is very shortly. But so all they're supposed to do is to test it out. They're supposed to do a series of little war games running around to see if the rest of the Russian fleet can detect them and rendezvous with another ship up north. And Ramius is like, okay, well, and the guy's like, Captain, if you'll permit me, I'd like to post our orders to the crew. This is an exciting day, you know, testing out this new technology and everything else. And he's like, okay. And as the guy turns to walk out of the office, it's so brutal. Sean Connery jumps up, grabs the guy by his forehead, and slams him down onto the corner of the table, breaking his neck.
Murdering him
completely and knocking him to the floor and watching him as he gasps his last breaths. He then takes out a different set of orders from his jacket and burns the set of orders they got. He takes a glass of tea that had been on the table and splashes it down on the floor next to where the guy's feet was, and calls the doctor and says, "There's been a dreadful accident." Yeah, so he completely murders him. We then jump over to Jack Ryan meeting up with Skip Tyler, who's played by Jeffrey Jones. And if you know who Jeffrey Jones is, he was the dad in Beetlejuice, which also had Alec Baldwin in it, by the way. Jeffrey Jones' personal life has a bit of a stain on it, given that he was convicted at one point of possessing child pornography later on in life. But in this movie, we don't know that, and it's fine.
Wasn't he in Howard the Duck?
Yes, he was the bad guy in Howard the Duck. Or I should say, he was the scientist who got possessed by the bad guy in Howard the Duck.
Yes.
Yeah. So Skip Tyler's a sub driver, some kind of like engineer now, or some kind of supervisor. And Jack Ryan's at some kind of shipyard. And we get a little glimpse of a thing called the DSRV, which is a deep submergence vehicle, or emergency submergence vehicle. It's like a mini submarine. Now, this is kind of a throwaway thing at the time, but it'll become important later on in the movie, because Skip Tyler mentions how, they're redesigning it so it can fit onto just about any sub in the case of an emergency, and it can get anywhere in the world in 24 hours. If you see this movie the first time, there's a whole bunch of little bits of information that get tossed into the ether that you don't know to pay attention to them, because they become important later. So that's one of the things that's both good and bad about the movie overall, is that it's a really good movie. However, you get so much more from it watching it successive times, because everything matters. Everything people say, every offhanded comment or anything else, in some way, shape, or form has a payoff later, which is great, but it also makes it something that you really can't get it all in one sitting, as far as I'm concerned.
This actually, where they make the comment about can get anywhere in 24 hours, does bring me to one of my complaints with the movie. They don't do a very good job letting us know time has passed. There's very few places where, like, when they get to the God, what's it called? The one trench that they're going to,
the Marianeris Trench or whatever.
Yeah, when they go there, we do get a visual on the screen that tells us that, but pretty much everywhere else, I mean, it's just an offhanded remark somebody makes. Like, we've been chasing him for 20 hours. That part did bother me a little bit.
Yeah, it's either an offhanded remark, or we get a little up in the top corner of the screen saying 20 hours later or the next day or something like that. And so, time is a little bit dilated in places, but I don't know how else they could have done it without making it even more sort of herky-jerky. So anyway, so Jack shows these pictures of the sub to Skip Tyler. Skip Tyler takes a look at them, and he's like, holy shit, this might be a Caterpillar, hydrodynamic drive. Do you know what that is? Like, no. Basically, it's a thing that pulls water in from the front of the ship, squirts it out the back, and propels the ship forward without any real moving parts, and so it's effectively silent. It is a silent engine. And he warns that something like this could park, a couple hundred warheads off of Washington, D.C., and nobody would know about it till everything was over with. And since the ship pulled out of the inlet the other day, like, oh shit, you've got the super weapon, you've got the evil empire sending their super weapon out to sea. What the fuck's going on?
This brings me to one more complaint I have with this movie. Because he says that we tried to do it, and couldn't. And as an American, that offended me. That's all.
Yeah, we tried to. We've messed around with this a couple of years ago. Couldn't make it work. Well, looks like the Russians have. Uh-oh. So yeah, that is another little.
Couldn't figure it out if we couldn't.
Yeah.
That's all.
Then we get a brief scene where they're zipping up the body of the political officer, and pointedly, and again, it wasn't until a couple of watchings that this made any sense. The doctor is there, played by Tim Curry, and Ramius says, hey, you, sailor, and there's this cook that's just kind of standing off to the side. He says, come over here. I want you two to witness this, as he takes off the political officer's key and says, I'm going to keep this, and we must continue. And the doctor's like, you shouldn't have both keys, Captain. He's like, why? Well, because that's bad. You don't want to do. You'll understand when I give you our orders, Doctor. Go away. Like, okay. Now, the cook just seems like a guy, but the cook is a very important character who will come up later and over the course of the movie. But it's so, again, offhanded and not sort of shoved in your face as to the importance of this person that, like, the first time I saw it, I didn't make the connection between him in the beginning of the movie and where we see him by the end of the movie. It took me a while. And that character, the actor that played the cook, Cook's assistant Loganov, I forget his name off the top of my head, but he went on later. I mean, he's been in a ton of movies, but he was the second in command of Maximus in Gladiator. He played Quintus. Oh, so if you ever see Gladiator again, the guy that's the second in command at the beginning of the movie, Quintus, same actor. So they take the missile keys. He goes off to start their orders. And then we cut back over to the Dallas, and they're still trying to follow this Russian sub, and they're staying right behind the sub to stay within the wake of its screws so that it can't detect that they're there. And then the captain gives his speech about to the crew, saying that basically our orders are to take our ship, park ourselves off the coast of the United States, conduct missile drills while they have no idea what we're doing, and then after we're done with that, we're going to take a trip to Cuba, and everybody will have a chance to drink and get laid, basically, is what he tells them.
Yep.
And so they start singing the Russian national anthem as they engage the silent drive, and as they turn off the regular engines and turn on the silent drive, the wake of the irregular engines is no longer there to cover up the fact that U.S. sub is there. And so suddenly they detect the U.S. sub right behind them, like, holy shit, there's a sub right behind us. And the captain's like, okay. And like, well, what about the singing? Let them sing. Because if you look at his face and and you've seen the movie before, there's a lot of really subtle acting going on, because Ramius knows all of these guys, he's putting all of these men into mortal danger without them knowing it. And so he's kind of like, let them sing. I mean, this might be the last time these guys ever go anywhere because of what I'm doing. I'm choosing to do on my own, basically. So they sing. Jonesy says he thought he could hear singing after the Russian sub disappeared. I mean, it disappeared. As far as the Dallas is concerned, the Russian sub just immediately vanished right in front of them, which doesn't make any sense. And so that starts that part of the mystery.
Well, it does make sense, because by here we've already heard about the screw or the Caterpillar drive.
No, I mean,
so it doesn't make sense.
No, to the crew of the sub, it doesn't make sense.
Okay.
Yeah. No, to the audience, it should make sense. It's like, oh yeah, they're in stealth mode. Then we jump over to like a Russian consulate or something, and we get this old guy walking down the hall, and everybody's saying hi to him. He's just like, yeah. He goes into his office, and this is one of the things that bugs me the most. His assistant, who is also supposed to be Russian, just sounds like an American. And
yes.
And so I am, when the scene on the ship showed me, zooming in on the guy's face as he was speaking Russian and zooming back out again to show that he was speaking English, to show the transition. The first couple times I saw this movie, I didn't quite understand why they didn't just do that whole scene in Russian. Why not? Because at that point, I didn't really get it. But the assistant sounds completely American, so I didn't know what he was doing there. But it turns out that this is a Russian guy. He's got a letter from Marco Ramius. As he's reading it, he drops his tea because he's read something horrific, which we'll find out pretty quick. Then a lot of stuff happens very quickly here. So that's when we get to the great briefing scene, where Jack Ryan meets Admiral Greer at this, I don't know, official government building or something. And they're going to go down there, and Jack is surprised to find out that he's about to give a briefing to a whole bunch of military brass and the National Security Advisor about the Red October. Mm-hmm. This is one of my favorite scenes, but it's also the scene that completely dropped the ball on one narrative element from the story that should have been there, would have only taken a couple of seconds to talk about. Or I should say it should have been mentioned somewhere in this film, but it never is. So Jack Ryan's giving this briefing to these guys about the submarine, how big it is, the silent drive that it pulled out of the coast, and then immediately afterwards, all of the Russian fleet started going after it. It seemed like following it, and they don't know why that is right at that moment. But then one of the guys in the briefing room says, "Okay, oh sorry."
They don't know that it's following it. All they know is that the entire Russian fleet has scrambled at this point.
Yes. And then one of the guys.
So to them, I'm sorry. To them, it looks like, okay, we have this new sub that can pull out literally within sight distance of Washington, D.C. and just nuke the entire East Coast. Plus, the entire Russian fleet has just set sail.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like full-scale war is on.
Well, that's the first thing. But then one of the guys at the meeting says, just so you know, and this is all top secret, this Russian official guy got a letter from Marco Ramius, the captain of the Red October, today, and basically it stated his intention to leave. Basically, he was off on his own, and then, or I should say, they don't know the contents of the letter, but immediately all the Russian subs were sent out with orders to sink the Red October. Yeah. So this is interpreted by everybody at the table. It's like, holy shit, we have a renegade Russian submarine captain on our hands with a silent ship with a whole bunch of nuclear missiles. Holy shit, holy shit, holy shit. And
real
then
quick, this is, if you don't mind, you mentioned a whole bunch of things happen real quick.
Yes.
That is how quick things happen in this movie. Literally, we go from we're about to go to war because the entire Russian naval fleet is coming for us to wait a minute, no, they're going to kill him. I just wanted to point that part out because it flows so well, and it shouldn't. That should have been a moment that just made everybody go, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And it works so well. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the information in this movie, there's a lot going on, but it is presented so naturally. I mean, there are very few moments in this movie where you feel like the exposition is artificial.
Yeah.
There's one or two places where it's a little heavy-handed, but in most places, everybody's relaying the information in a way that is organic to the situation and also to the characters, which also makes it just a joy to watch as far as the drama. But as they're sitting there all arguing over like the emergency of this, Jack Ryan is sitting there and he's looking at Ramius, and he asks Greer, "Today's the 23rd, isn't it?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he's like, he goes, "You son of a bitch, you son of a bitch." And he's all like giddy, he's happy, like he's figured something out. And everybody gets quiet. The National Security Advisor guy says, "You have something you'd like to say, Dr. Ryan?" The way he says Dr. Ryan always sticks in my head. And so Jack Ryan suggests that perhaps what he's doing is defecting because he's not Russian, he's Lithuanian by birth. B, he has no children, so he has no ties to that country. He'd be in a position to be able to pick executive crew that would be willing to go along with him. And today, the day that they pulled out and is making this run or whatever, is the anniversary of his wife's death. Now, this is the one thing that is never said in the movie, that is in the book, that explains why Ramius is doing this. Okay. At the end of this movie, he gives the sappiest explanation as to why he did it, but we'll get there. The real reason he's doing this is because, yes, it is the anniversary of his wife's death. How did his wife die? She died on the operating table for a simple operation that was performed by a drunk surgeon who received no punishment because he was the son of a party member. That is his motivation, revenge against this government and this country that he served for his entire career and betrayed him utterly in getting justice for his wife because the very country and empire that he was serving betrayed his honor and trust. That's why he was doing it. At no point is that ever brought up, just that his wife died. And no other context as to that event. It always bugged me. And sorry, man.
You don't like the reason they give at the end?
No. The Greenpeace reason at the end? No, I don't.
Greenpeace reason?
Well, okay, well, we'll jump ahead a little bit. He talks about how this ship was built for war. And like,
not
yes.
just for war, to start the war.
To start a war, yeah. His motivation was, I don't want to start a war. Like, the anti-war message, it might have been part, sure, it could have been part of his motivation, but taking away his his revenge motive against the Soviet Union for that betrayal, that bugs the hell out of me that they didn't make something out of that for the sake of the story, because otherwise his motivations just seem so way too nebulous. Way too nebulous.
Well, there's a part when he's talking with his second in command, and I'm sorry, I'm going to forget his name. Sam Neill, that's what I'm going to call him.
Yes, it's fine.
Where he's talking about the Cold War, and he mentions that the and I think it's when he's talking to him. Sam Neill's talking about how he wants to go live in Montana.
Yeah.
During that scene, he talks about how they've been at war and there's been no battles, just deaths.
Yes.
And if you couple that with the notion that that a sub like that would be the only reason to build it, if you're an American making a movie about Russians,
yes,
then I can see it. You know, I do not want to be responsible for that happening. So I can see that, because contrary to what most people think, most military people are not in favor of war.
Yes.
They're actually very much against it because, well, one, they're on the front lines. Not just them, but their friends and their family. And so I kind of like their reasoning they give. I understand that if you read the book, there's probably, I mean, that makes more sense, you know, the revenge thing.
Yeah.
But revenge against one man by turning over the sub doesn't make a lot of sense to me either.
Well, okay, if it had been part of, like, you know, I was betrayed by the state, and then they hand me this weapon of war, and I can't trust them because of what happened to my wife.
That makes more sense.
That would make a hell of a lot more sense. I'm not saying that what the explanation he gives is bad necessarily. I'm saying that it is by itself doesn't justify to me the amount of risk and action he is taking as portrayed in the film. If there's not that personal motivation to at least spark this is what I wanted as a viewer from then until now. But, you know, it is a minor complaint, except it is as far as I'm concerned, it is the one ultimate narrative failing of this film, is that they did not give Ramius enough of a personal stake in why he was doing what he was doing. I don't want to be part of a war kind of thing. It's not bad, but that alone does not seem like it's enough to me to overturn someone who's been a professional military person his entire life. So anyway, again, not the end of the world, so to speak. It is a part that always bugs me and has bugged me forever. After the meeting, we jump to, Ryan explains to the National Security Advisor that, well, if my theory is right, then we have to do all this, do any contact or communications in person.
We have to talk about this.
Okay.
We have to, because so he kicks everybody, or the National Security Advisor basically ends the meeting, tells everybody to go away.
Yeah.
But he keeps Jack around, which is fine. But then he sits down to talk to Jack, and this is the only really unnatural dialogue I found in the whole film.
Okay.
Because he says, "I'm a politician. That means I'm a liar and a cheat."
And when I'm not kissing the babies, I'm stealing their lollipops.
I'm stealing their lollipops. Yeah.
It's a great line.
It is, but it's not something. It's not natural.
Okay.
I can see what he says next, because what he follows that up with, he says, "It also means I leave my options open." Now, if he had just stated that, or even stated, you know, people don't trust me because I'm a politician, but I leave my options open.
Sure.
That's fine. To me, that just seemed like a slam.
Okay.
It was thrown in for the writers, or I don't know if it's actually in the book as well. It just did not come off natural. It's the only time in the whole book or movie where I'm like, no, nobody would say that.
Okay. I don't have a problem with it. I've always liked that line, because it gives you maybe a ham-handed, but it gives you an insight into this particular. We only see that character like in 3 scenes in this entire movie. So the couple of times that we see him later, being able to read him as a bit of a conniver, given the situation, makes sense. Maybe that wasn't the best way to deliver that notion about the character, but I don't know. I've never really had a problem with it.
No, just when I was watching it today, I had even forgot that line was in there. But But yeah, that's the only problem. Like, no. Because nobody would. Who's going to come up and tell you I'm a liar and a cheat? I'm a liar and a cheat. Now, let's talk.
So he gives Ryan the opportunity to try to prove his theory. He gives him 3 days to personally go out and try to make contact. And if he can prove it all by himself, then okay. But otherwise, he's then going to have to mobilize like the American fleet to go sink this guy because they can't take the risk. So now Jack's like, but no, he's like, but the Admiral was right. I'm not a field agent. I'm just an analyst. And the guy's like, yeah, but you know this stuff better than anybody else. You believe in it. And unlike everybody else here, and Ryan cuts in, I'm expendable. Yeah, something like that. It's just like, okay, now we know on what level we're talking about here, which I kind of appreciated the fact that it's like, yeah, I'm a liar and a cheat, and also you're expendable.
Real quick, Cuddles in chat says Scribe and Monkey have weird problems with movies. It's a movie. It's not real, Monkey. I understand it's not real, but there's this idea in telling a story that you don't take your audience out of the story. And for me, that took me out of the story because nobody's going to tell you I'm a liar and a cheat. That's all. And yeah, it is a very nitpicky thing, but that's what we do here.
Well, see, here's the thing, though. If something like that is the biggest complaint Monkey has about this film as we proceed, it's a pretty good movie, guys. Just telling you.
Yeah, no shit.
So then we cut over to the other Russian submarine that will be important by the end of the movie, but we only see briefly here. And this is the what's it called? Well, the captain's name is Tupolev.
Tupolev, yeah.
And he's played by Stellan Skarsgård. And if you don't know who Stellan Skarsgård is, if you've seen Ronin, if you've seen the Thor movies with the Norwegian professor and everything, Stellan Skarsgård is one of the best actors in the world, in my opinion. Yeah, I can't say enough about it, but he is an absolute baby here. It's the very first time I'd ever seen him on film as a kid. He would go on to do a whole bunch of awesome things. And his son, I forget what his name is off the top of my head, he was the blonde, muscular vampire in True Blood. His family is a family of actors, amongst other things. But Stellan Skarsgård's great. And he gets his orders to go hunt down Ramius on a delay. Like the orders were 7 hours old, so they're already behind schedule. So they're not with the rest of the fleet. They're actually operating separately. And so he's also been mentioned as being previously when Ramius was talking to the political officer, Tupolev is his former student. So he knows Ramius personally. He knows his tactics and everything else. So now he's on the hunt specifically for Ramius to go out and kill him. Not important at the moment, but it'll become really important by the end of the film. Let's see. Then we have a scene where Ramius has dinner with all of his conspirators, officers in the cabin. And he explains to them, well, a couple of revelations for this group of people that he brought in. One, he killed the political officer. I guess they all believe for some reason that he actually had an accident, but now they're like, holy shit, you murdered him? And he's like, and then one of the guys is like, I don't care if he was murdered. The man was a pig. But but it should have been a decision we all made. Like, okay. And then so we also find out who all our conspirators are. It's everybody except Tim Curry, basically. Tim Curry's the odd man out. All the other officers are in on it. And the engineer. But then he also tells them that he sent a letter declaring his intentions to defect to the guy who turned out to be his wife's uncle or something, which, again, it's an interesting little tidbit, but doesn't really mean anything. So now the Russian Navy knows, and that's why they're hunting him. And all the guys around the table are like, holy shit, you just signed our death warrants. And he's like, why would you do that? And he said, when Cortez first came to the New World, he burned his ships. Thus, his men were quite motivated. So he was basically cutting ties. He's telling these guys, there's no going back now. You know, we can't have anybody. Nobody's going to chicken out now. It's either you're going to go forward or you're going to die, which is a really brutal way of doing it, but effective, I suppose. So all these guys are like, holy shit, I guess we're stuck now. Then we cut to Ryan on a plane heading towards this, or it's like a C-130 or something, heading towards a ship out at sea. And turbulence is the least of his problems because the whole plane is shaking, and he's obviously freaking out and sweating and everything else. And some guy's yelling at him about, "Oh man, you think this is bad? You should have seen it a couple days ago. I was puking toxic waste all over the place." And
Do you know who that guy is?
I recognize the voice, but I don't know.
His name is Rick Dukeman. He's a comedian, and he was in the movie The Burbs with Tom Hanks.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I've only seen him do stand-up once, and it was actually one of the funniest stand-up shows I've ever seen, which is why I recognize him in anything. But yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in this movie that have really bit parts that are like bigger stars later. They have like 3 seconds on film, but you've seen them in a bunch of places elsewise. So anyway, so he makes it to the USS Enterprise, which is this giant aircraft carrier, where he meets Fred Thompson, who's an admiral. And of course, Fred Thompson is an actor and also a would-be presidential candidate at one point in real life.
And a senator.
Senator Fred Thompson. He's a very storied career, Fred Thompson. The first time I ever saw him, I think, was this movie. And then when he showed up in Law and Order years later and also as a senator, it was also freaked me out. But yeah, he's done it all, just about. So he meets with Fred Thompson and this captain of the ship and everything, and he tries to explain to them what's going on with Red October. But it's kind of a scene that gets chopped up a little bit because in the middle of it, Ensign Jones takes his theory off to the captain. And this is a great scene because it really sets up the relationship between the 3 characters on the ship, Jones, the captain, and his XO. And so Jones approaches the captain and says, "Hey, Captain, when that submarine disappeared, I heard something really weird. And I heard it again as we've been moving on. And I've been tracking its progress." And he's like, "Well, what is it?" And he plays from a tape of like this humming sound. And he says, the computer thinks it's a seismic anomaly, but of course the computer was built to originally pick up earthquakes and things. So when it doesn't know what to do with the sound, I think it, runs home to mama, he says. And the captain is just not having any kind of humor or anything. He's like, "I don't get it. What?" He's like, "Okay, well, let me play it at 10 times speed," and he speeds it up, and it's just this clanging sounds, bang, 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 bang. He's like, that's got to be man-made. He shows him the track he's had of where the sounds were heard. He shows them on a map that they're all leading directly to a point that they know is the beginning of a secret route called Red Route 1, where the Russians can like dodge around heading towards the eastern seaboard. And so the dynamic between the captain and the XO and this sort of like grudging professional respect between everybody and just like, well, good job, son, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. I really like that little scene. That scene really plays well, and all the guys do a really good job playing that up.
Well, my favorite part of that scene is the XO takes off and Jonesy starts to wander away too. Mm-hmm. And Cap's like, "Wait a minute, Jonesy." And the reason he calls him back is because you see it on the captain hasn't really told them, he hasn't let them in on what he's thinking. And so Jonesy actually looks kind of defeated at this point. But it turns out the captain's actually on his side. He's like, "You sold me. Now what do we do? Can you track it if I get you close enough?" Mm-hmm. And you see Jonesy just smile like the kid who's got his dad's approval. Yeah, I can. So yeah, it's an excellent scene. It's a really, really good scene.
Yeah, really. There's a whole lot said without words. I love it. The acting's great. We jump back to the USS Enterprise where presumably Ryan's given them the whole rundown in between scenes as to everything we already know about the Red October. And so the admiral guy on the ship starts quizzing Jack on exactly what are you going to do? So, once you get this sub, what are you going to do with the crew? And what are you going to do with this? And what are you going to do with that? And, Jack's got no idea. He's like, "I have no idea what I'd do with the crew or anything else. I just want to get that submarine." He's so excited about getting the submarine that he's not thinking about all the other logistics. And Fred Thompson says one of the best lines when he says, "Russian don't take a dump without a plan, son." It's just like, and so Jack, and so he says, "Yeah, have you gotten any sleep lately?" He's like, "No." He sends him off to go get some sleep. And then we get the backstory about Jack Ryan and exactly why he's all freaked out about flying and turbulence and all this other stuff. And the captain of the ship doesn't like him because he shouldn't be wearing the uniform, and he doesn't like these CIA guys and all this. And then Fred Thompson,
when he shows up on the ship, he's wearing a naval uniform, and he actually apologizes it when he first meets Fred Thompson. I'm sorry about the uniform. They thought it would be a better, it would be more
low
incognito.
profile. Yeah,
low profile. Thank you. And that part is actually played up very well. If you show up in a uniform that you didn't earn, they will treat you like shit.
Yeah, but Fred Thompson explains to the guy that's like, he's a former Marine, went down in a chopper crash several years ago. His entire crew was killed. He broke his back. He spent 10 months in traction learning to walk again. So you might cut the kid a little slack. And, the look on the captain's face is like, oh shit, he's a Marine? Oh. So now we know why he's more a paper pusher now than he is a, gung-ho kind of guy, and why flying in general makes him nervous.
Because they mentioned he tells him he was at the academy. He was at Annapolis. So
yes.
I mean, not just military. He was going to be a military officer.
Right. Let's see. Okay. Then we have a very pivotal scene over on the Red October where suddenly the silent drive goes kablooey. Basically, everything goes offline. There's like an explosion sound, and it turns out that some part of the silent drive has been, cut up. Basically, we find out later, sabotaged. This is it's sabotage. So they have to resort back to going to the regular engines, and they're like, we won't be silent, and like, we got to keep moving. I mean, Ramius can't let the thing sit still. And then so they start moving again. And then we cut back to our national security advisor guy talking to the Russian ambassador. And now we know what the national security advisor already knows about the situation. The Russian ambassador doesn't know what the NSA guy knows, the national security advisor knows. So he's quizzing the Russian guys like, you got to tell us what's going on. You've dropped enough sonar buoys across the Atlantic so that you could walk from one end to the other. What's going on? And he's like, we're missing one of our subs, and we're trying to find him. We're afraid they may have gone down somewhere. And so so he's like, oh, so this is like a massive rescue mission, because it sure looks like a move against NATO or something. What are you doing? And he's like, no. And he's like, oh, well, my apologies. How can we help? And because it's like, a joint operation, try to find the sub for you. And the Russian ambassador's like, I think we're doing everything we can right now. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then we, just right off that conversation. Oh, sorry.
Keeping it in our theme with mentioning where these people have been seen before. That's the guy who plays the bad guy in Lethal Weapon 2. Yes,
that is true. Yeah. He, like everybody in this movie, just about of any role, is someone you've seen somewhere else before. Mm-hmm. So they're all very practiced actors, and it's really, it's a real credit to this movie that they didn't go stingy on finding actors even for the smaller roles, because, like I said, every part of this movie is important to the overall story. So everybody has to be pitch perfect to make it all work. But anyway, after that conversation, we immediately jump over to one of those very planes that have been dropping sonar buoys, and now that the Red October has turned on its regular engines, they've detected them. And they drop a torpedo in the water. And this is one of the most tense scenes in the movie to this point, because this torpedo is coming straight at the Red October. The entire crew still thinks that they're on some kind of training mission. So this torpedo's coming at them, and they're in the middle of this trench with very little room to maneuver around these rocks and these barriers and everything. And Sean Connery's character is sitting there as they're trying to maneuver, and this torpedo's coming straight at him. And they're heading for a wall, basically. And he's timing off in his head. You can see him thinking in his head when they need to turn at the very last second to allow the torpedo to go straight past them and not have enough room to arc and follow them to slam into the wall rather than hit the submarine. And those couple of minutes, if you don't know what's going on in the movie, it's really, really tense. And as soon as the torpedo blows up, everybody in the ship that isn't one of the executive crew, and even then, are staring at him like, the fuck, that was a real torpedo.
This is the one scene I was talking about before where I don't think that scene is necessarily necessary.
Okay.
because one, we have the whole torpedo thing, and then the next thing you know, they're on their way again. The plane doesn't like call in the entire Russian fleet.
Mm-hmm.
When other than to give us just a little bit of how cool he is under pressure, which is fine, because that's part of his character. It doesn't serve much of a purpose.
It heightens the suspicions of the crew. It puts the executive officers and Ramius on notice that they don't have much extra time to try to keep this lie up unless something happens. And then, in addition to the sabotage, you know, there's not much time left to keep this illusion up. That's what it serves me. Also, like you say, it does show that he is a natural. Well, he understands the logistics of what's going on around him in the submarine and outside, and torpedoes and the whole 9 yards. It does highlight the fact that he is like a genius when it comes to naval strategy and everything else. So I think it does serve the film in that sense. Although you're right in the sense that this revelation to the crew that it doesn't seem as much like a training mission when they're using live torpedoes never really has a payoff. That part,
it just kind of goes away.
Yeah, that part I will agree with you. There's never a point where there's a payoff because the sabotage has already happened. The one person who already knows things are fucked up is doing what he's doing. So this scene, in that sense, doesn't have a payoff. So I'll agree with you there. Then we cut to Ryan trying to figure out how would they get the crew off the submarine? How would you want to get a crew off of a nuclear submarine? He's like, oh shit, of course. And so he's got this theory in his head that obviously they're going to stage some kind of nuclear accident or something to surface and get the crew off the ship in order to defect and get away. And then Ryan makes the argument that he finds out that the Dallas has been tracking some anomalous sound or something somewhere while the rest of the American and Russian fleets are off running around trying to find the Red October. And by the description of what supposedly the Dallas has found, he traces that back to what Skip Tyler told him about what the silent drive might sound like if you ever heard it on sonar. And he says, I think the Dallas has found the Red October. And Fred Thompson's like, they haven't found anything. And he's like, no, I need to get on the Dallas. And he's like, son, the only way we can get you on that ship is to fly you out, is to strip down a helicopter to a gas can and fly you out there. And as soon as he says helicopter, he's like, oh shit. Because like, oh fuck, helicopter's like his kryptonite. So, but there's really no other option. If he's going to try to prove his theory, if he's going to try to see if this is really a defection, it's the only way to do it. So, that's where we end up going. Then we have the very poignant conversation between Ramius and his second in command about what they're going to do when they get to America. And this is one of my favorite scenes because of the sort of childlike wonder on Sam Neill's face as he's kind of like, I'm going to live in Montana and I will find a round American wife and raise rabbits. Yes. And then I will get a pickup truck.
And she will cook them for me.
And she will cook them for me. And I will get a pickup truck. No, a recreational vehicle. And I will drive state to state. You can do that, can't you? State to state. And
don't need papers?
No papers? No papers. Oh, he's just such a child. It's just, it's just brilliant. It's just brilliant.
And it's a really good scene if you were around at the time and you haven't just seen it through history. The idea that Americans and Russians thought about each other quite often, but really didn't know shit about each other's lives is pretty true. I mean, it was impossible to be in either country and not think about the other one. And yet, I don't want to say, people didn't understand, because there were people who knew the differences, but somebody coming from Russia to the U.S., no idea what they would be getting into.
Yeah, the Russian,
unless they'd like, studied.
Yeah, the Russian.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh.
You go. I'm done.
Okay. The Russian propaganda at the time was so thick against American and Western values and everything that if you were stuck in the bubble of the sort of Soviet message machine of what the rest of the world was like, you could be forgiven for not having any idea about what you could or could not do legally or officially over in America. So seeing this executive officer of a submarine reduced to basically like dreamy land of milk and honey notions floating before his eyes is really entertaining. And Sam Neill sells it. He really does sell it. I mean, between being the professional, serious executive officer or whatever, anywhere else on the ship, but in private with the captain, he's just kind of like, oh boy, we're going to go over to America.
Yes.
So let's see. We get this little brief thing about how the Red October, which is still detectable at this point, does a Crazy Ivan. And Crazy Ivan is basically a sudden turn in a submarine to sort of, on the off chance that someone's following them in their baffles, so to speak. They turn suddenly without warning in order to put off any followers and take away their ability to hide in the cavitation of the screws. And this is called a Crazy Ivan because I guess it was a Russian tactic, or at least attributed to Russians, and that's where it comes from. Ramius mentions how his wife died while he was at sea, and that kind of goes towards having a personal about being a military man and having a real life kind of thing, but still it doesn't mention how she died or anything else, which is kind of irritating.
Can we talk real quick about the way submarines move in this movie?
Sure.
I understand it's for dramatic effect, but they have these things basically turning on a dime.
Yeah.
And they don't move like that. You asked, about the whole military. That would be, if my dad watched this movie with me, that would be the part that pissed him off.
Yeah,
that ain't how they move.
Yeah, there's some artistic conceits here made just for the sake of action and movement and everything else. And, but in the context of the film, it works, even though obviously if you're watching it as someone who understands physics or, nautical engineering, it's probably not going to make you happy.
Excuse me. As I said, I can give it a pass because of artistic license, but that is not how submarines move.
Sure. Well, in the middle of following, so the Dallas is tracking. Sorry, I misspoke earlier. The Red October had repaired its silent drive, but the Dallas is effectively following it at this point using Jonesy's tracking method. They're staying far enough away that and running as quietly as they can that they won't be picked up, even in the case of the Crazy Ivan. But in the middle of this, they get a communication from the USS Enterprise saying, prepare to pick up a guy flying out to helicopter. And he's like, oh shit, why is this? And they got their orders, so they have to break off their tracking the Red October. They have to surface. Ryan is flown out there in a helicopter. He's lowered down slowly on this cable in the middle of a rain and thunder and lightning storm and all this other stuff. As they're going up to grab, because they have to surface in order to try to catch him as he's swinging around on this cable. And as they're going up the ladder, the captain reminds his XO, he's like, there's going to be so much static electricity coming off of those propellers. Don't touch him. Just grab the cable with this hook. Otherwise, you're going to get shocked. And that's exactly what happens, of course, because the wind and the rain and everything else is swinging Ryan around. It bonks the XO in the head, and he gets zapped with static electricity in the middle of his head, which is kind of crazy. And they're running out of gas in the helicopter. They're about to turn around. They're trying to pull him up, and Ryan's like, fuck it. And he cuts the cord, and he falls into the ocean right next to the submarine. They pull him on board, and Ryan explains to him, like, I need you to find the Red October. I think you may have found it. He's like, we already found it, dude. We were following it. We had to break off to come get your ass. He's like,
real
oh,
quick.
Shit.
I mentioned that the animation, we'll put it that way, because I called it CGI. You're correct. It wasn't technically CGI. It's the old animation.
Yeah, the rain sucks.
That whole scene,
yeah,
this is one of the things that Amazon tells you, was shot on a sunny day in a parking lot.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give them credit here. It does not look like it. It's actually one of the better scenes, knowing what they had to do there. Mm-hmm. I'll give them credit on that one. That one wasn't bad.
Well, the rain, if you watch the rain, it is animated badly. It's just like a filter they put over in several scenes, and it doesn't look real at all. That's the one thing that detracts from that scene for me. But if you're not really being nitpicky about it, you wouldn't even notice it.
I don't know if you've ever tried to take a sunny picture and make it look dark. It is not easy.
Oh yeah, day for night. Yeah, that's why most movies where you see that happen, it's just so obvious because it's so difficult to do.
But yeah, I give him props for that one.
So anyway, so then Ryan has to convince the captain that this Russian sub, which is silent, which has all these weapons for it on it, which is heading towards the eastern seaboard, isn't getting ready to attack and is actually trying to defect. But the captain's not having any of it because his orders are to basically find this thing and blow it out of the water because of what's going on. And so in one of the weirdest scenes, I mean, even to this day, I'm not quite sure how it tracks, but Ryan looks at him and says, "Has he made any crazy Ivans?" And he's like, "Why do you ask?" He's like, I know Ramius. I know what kind of man he is. He's going to make a crazy Ivan at the bottom of the hour." Or he says to starboard at the bottom of the hour or whatever. And all of a sudden, right in the middle of their conversation, because at this point, Ryan is sounding a little crazed. The captain says, bring the chief of the boat here with his sidearm. Because it's like, you're not going to do something crazy on my boat, dude. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of this, crazy Ivan to starboard. And this apparently gets Ryan's foot in the door of getting the captain to think that maybe there's something here, or he's willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. To this moment, it feels like it works. I don't know why it works. You know, why is it that? Maybe it's the naval thing. Maybe it's his claims that he knows how this guy's mind works, and that's the edge the captain needs to sort of give an excuse to this. That's the one part that has always been, I don't want to say it's bad, but I'm still not quite sure it sells me on it.
This is another one of those times you asked about, you know, the military thing. And a captain who would do that would not have a ship.
Yeah.
I get it. Artistic license works for the movie. I think it worked for the movie. You're right. But no, yeah, it should have been something a little deeper to make a captain who's been ordered to destroy a silent running sub, a nuclear sub, a nuke. This is basically a missile platform, and he calls it off because he turned starboard. No.
Yeah, he made a prediction about what the guy would do as a naval tactician, I guess, and that tells the captain that he knows enough to give him. Anyway, so that happens. The captain orders full back on the engines, which basically tells the Red October that there's a ship there because all the noise it's making. And then we get one of the. I was talking earlier about gamesmanship. This is one of those scenes where the two ships are communicating with each other. About the gamesmanship of sort of like building a trust, a communication. I mean, before we had communication across nations over the potential of war between the National Security Advisor and the Russian ambassador. Now we're winnowing it down to if depending on how these two ships talk to each other, these two ship captains basically, is going to decide the fate of maybe the world. If things aren't done, this is how tense it is down this. And this is one of the things the movie gets really right about Tom Clancy novels. Tom Clancy in his early novels had this flair for taking really huge sort of concepts in the geopolitics and winnowing them down to the decisions of individuals or the decisions of very small groups of people, and letting the audience see the gears turning so that you could relate to it. Because if you're just a guy watching the news or reading the newspaper about all the movements of nations and stuff, it might seem so amorphous and so big and so complex. And it's not to say that it isn't, but it all starts with usually two people in a room or two people on a phone together starting off with something, and then that blossoms out. And so this is one of the things I really like about this movie, where it not only shows the big picture, but it also shows how really small decisions can make all the difference. And so we get the back and forth using the periscope light, where the captain is using Morse code to give a message to Ramius. Basically, it's like, so we think you might be defecting. If that is your intention, send us back with a ping. And what a ping is, it's a naval term, which also has turned into, of course, an internet term, which basically means that the submarine sends out a loud bell, basically, that reverberates off of any targets nearby, and that bounces back to the sonar of the ship to basically tell them, sort of like a bat radar, how far away the object is. But it also reverberates on the target ship as a sound, so it's a signal that Ramius sends, like, give me a ping, one ping only. And he sends a ping and he lets them know that, yes, I'm here to defect. And then they hatch this plan of where to go and how to make this happen.
I just say the captain of the Dallas and Ramius both being able to understand that much Morse code without writing it down is amazing.
Yeah, that is another artistic conceit where basically, like, Ryan like starts reading stuff off a card, and without having it written down in front of him, the captain just starts clicking it through. And then when he does finally hand the captain something, he just like clicks it through really fast. It's just, it's a little bit, like I said,
it's a little ridiculous, but it's a movie. It's okay.
Suspension of disbelief. And then after that, we get and then so they direct the captain, or Ramius, to move the Red October to this really deep part of the ocean called the Laurentian Abyssal, which is just this, like, so there's a lot of room to maneuver down there because they're going to need it to do what they need to do. And then we get a little thing that says 20 hours later. So it's been almost a day since the Periscope conversation. That's when the reactor suddenly has a leak on the Red October. All the alarms start going off. The doctor starts going crazy. The captain's like, oh, we'll vent the air. We'll rise and vent the air and everything will be fine. He's like, you can't vent the air, Captain. Everything in this ship is now irradiated. He's like, well, I guess we'll just have to get the crew off the ship. It's just like, and the music has got this little, like, happy little, like, humorous lilt to it as it goes on, where they're obviously gaming the doctor, and everybody knows it.
That scene is actually a little better than you're giving him credit there for, because Ramius lets the doctor tell him everybody has to get off the ship.
Yes, this is true. This is very true. Yes, he games the doctor as well to make him make the decision.
Yeah, so there's no reason for anybody to suspect anything, because the doctor's the one who said, let's get everybody off the ship.
Yeah, that's true. So they get everybody onto the bow of the ship, basically. They surface, they get everybody out there on rafts and everything. And as they're out there, off in the distance, amazingly enough, the XO, Sam Neill, spots this warship, this American warship off in the distance that's coming towards them, and it's signaling at them, Red October, prepare to be boarded, basically. And they're like, oh shit, they know where we are. And so the captain gets all grim, and he looks at the doctor and says, make sure all the men are secured, get a head count. Then I and the crew will submerge and scuttle the ship so that the Americans can't capture us. And Tim Curry looking at Ramius with these stars in his eyes, like, you'll get the Order of Lenin for this, Captain. It's just like, it's just he basically wants to start humping the captain's leg at that point. Oh, you're so Russian. And so, and
you're so Russian. I love that. That's beautiful.
Oh, and so the warship, as part of a ploy, we're starting to get the idea that this is a ploy at this point, fires a warning shot across the bow to show that they're serious. And so then the submarine submerges, and then we cut over to the battleship, where we see a torpedo operator or something sitting there, and he's launched a torpedo. And he's tracking down how many meters it is between them and the torpedo going to hit the sub. And as he's counting down from like 600 to 500 to 300, this hand reaches out over to the ignition button, hovers over it, and as it's 300 meters away from the ship, from the submarine, fingers pressed down, the torpedo explodes far away from where the sub actually is. Camera pans up, and it's Admiral Greer with Skip Tyler standing there. He's like, okay, son, you heard that torpedo hit the hull, and I was never here. So it's this ploy to make it seem like the Americans have sunk the Red October. But it's not over yet, because Ryan and the captain from the Dallas and a couple other guys, all of a sudden, because of what we heard earlier about and because Skip Tyler is there, within a day, they got the DSRV, the small submarine rescue sub there. And they all get on the little small rescue sub, and they move over from the Dallas to the Red October to meet the captain and the defecting crew. And we have a a nice little scene where the crew, like Jonesy and the captain and Ryan, they're all standing there in the dark, basically, with these Russian guys, and they start having a little banter back and forth about things. And Alec Baldwin does his best Russian, I suppose, for the sake of like talking to Ramius in his own language. But we very quickly switch over to English because we can't keep that up forever.
Well, what happens is they first board. Ryan asks for a cigarette from the engineer, who gives him one, and he makes the joke that he's turning green. Ryan has turned down cigarettes throughout this whole movie.
Yes, that's true.
But he takes one to try to make peace, and then Ramius leans over to Sam Neill and says something, and Alec laughs. And the captain goes, "What?" He seems to think you're some kind of cowboy
because he got a gun on his hip.
Yeah, because they brought sidearms with them, which, yeah, that's what you would do. But this scene works so well because of the reason they end up switching into English is because Ramius asks him, "You speak Russian?" And he goes, "A little bit. It's good to know your adversaries. Don't you agree?" And then in English, he answers, "Yes, it is." It worked so fucking well.
Yes, yeah, it was. I love that scene. It's so great. And so basically he says, I present to you the Red October. I wish to defect, etc. And just as that happens, the sound of a torpedo swooshing by is heard by everybody in the ship, and they're like, and the Russian guys are like, "Oh shit, the Americans are shooting at us again." And Jonesy's like, no, the pitch is too high. That's a Russian torpedo. And then suddenly the Tupolev and his ship, the other Russian ship from way back when, Stellan Skarsgård, he's found the Red October and he's zeroing in on him. And so all of a sudden, this skeleton crew on the Red October of the executive officers and a couple of guys from the Dallas suddenly have to take control of the Red October to try to maneuver around this attacking sub because they're going to try to sink them. And so
real quick, this is another problem I had with the movie, and it's not a major one. Again, I get it, artistic license, but this sub came from nowhere. Nobody knew it was coming.
Yeah,
it doesn't have a caterpillar drive like the Red October. They should have known.
Yeah, the warship should have had some idea that there was another sub in the territory, probably.
Yeah,
but anyway, somebody should have heard it. But anyway, so Ryan is put at one of the control panels, but he doesn't know how to drive a fucking sub, so he's got to take like lessons from Ramius as he's sitting there turning dials and shit. And the Russian sub fires another torpedo, and so Ramius orders Ryan specifically to turn the Red October into the path of the torpedo, so that the nose is basically facing right at it. And the captain of Dallas is like, "Don't do that. That's suicide. That's wrong." And Ramius is like, "Do it. Trust me." And Ryan's like, "I trust the Russian sub captain." So he does what the captain says. And as they're sitting there with a countdown of like 20 seconds until this torpedo is going to slam right into the nose of the submarine, Ramius asks him, because Ryan explained earlier that he's an analyst, that he wrote books for the CIA and everything. And Ramius says, "What books did you write?" And he's like, "Oh, I wrote a book about Admiral Halsey."
Well, first he goes, "Excuse me?" He goes, "What books? What books did you write?"
Yeah, he's just so calm. He's so cool. It's like you're about to die, but it's like, "Yeah, what books did you write?" And he says, "I wrote a book about Admiral Halsey and, the fighting sailor and what he did here, there, and otherwise." And then Ramius laughs and says, "Oh, I read that book. You were completely wrong, Ryan. Halsey acted stupidly." And then they cut over to the captain. And I'm thinking, and this is not said, and I might be imposing this, but given how much of a sales pitch Ryan had given the captain to this point of how well he knew not only Ramius, but sort of naval tactics, to have Ramius tell Ryan how much of an idiot he was, I just thought was a great little icing on the shit cake of why did I believe this guy? So, because right in the moment where like Ramius's orders are turning them into a torpedo, but it turns out that Ramius was right, because by turning the submarine into the torpedo and speeding towards it, he closed the distance quicker to the torpedo than it would have been otherwise, and its safeties had not yet gone off. So it was basically just a piece of metal that hadn't actually armed itself at that point. Which, you know, in the course of like, for the sake of movie submarine tactics, seems like a brilliant move. But of course, Ramius is like, okay, well, we only had one shot at that because he's going to remove all the safeties off of his torpedoes right now. So we got to get out of here. And that, all of a sudden, is when gunfire rings out. And we see somebody on the ship, it just started shooting. Borodin or Sam Neill pushed the captain out of the way of the line of fire. And whoever it was that got away for the moment. And now Sam Neill has been shot and he dies. And he says one of the best lines ever. I would have liked to have seen Montana. He dies.
Now, when that first happened, the first time I saw this, I was shocked. I was like, how? No, you can't let him die.
Yeah.
As I watched it today, you know what my mind went to? There's no bullet hole in his shirt.
I didn't see that. I saw the red stain and everything, but I guess I didn't see. You're right. I didn't see a bullet hole.
He's shot there, and there's just a red stain, but there's no bullet hole. It's like, wow, you guys missed that one.
Maybe the bullet had a silent drive.
Yeah, it's a stealth bullet.
So then, Captain of the Dallas basically takes over. Ramius knows the ship better than anybody at that point. Everybody else is basically necessary on the bridge to sort of direct the ship as they're trying to chase around and avoid the other submarine. So now they not only do they have a submarine chase, and they got some guy with a gun on the ship. And so Ramius and Ryan go off both with guns to try to chase down the saboteur. And so they get near to where the missile bay is, and Ryan's like, "Can he launch a missile from here?" And Ramius is like, "No, but he can blow one up, which would just incinerate the ship." Ramius gets winged by another bullet, and so he's down, but he's situated in such a way that he's at the only entrance and exit of the place. So Ryan says, okay, you stay here, don't let anybody get past. And Ryan goes out, but just as he's leaving, Ramius says, Ryan, be careful what you shoot at. Most things in here don't react well to bullets.
Yes.
And he's like, and then we pan back and we see Ryan standing in front of a long hallway of nothing but nuclear missile tubes, and it's like, oh shit. You're just like, fuck. So then we jump back to the submarine maneuvering, and the Russian submarine is aiming straight at the Red October, fires a torpedo, and it's coming straight at him. But then right in between the two ships, the Dallas maneuvers right between them to sort of grab the torpedo's attention and trail it off.
Yeah.
And so, which again, probably does not make any sense in the reality of physics or naval maneuvering, the way it's presented. I'm sure it could work in real life in a way, probably not as quickly as it does in the movie. But anyway, so the Dallas...
You need a lot more time.
You need a lot more time. So the Dallas maneuvers to sort of act as a linebacker, basically. And then it moves up and then quick surfaces. It like blows all the tanks and like raises and shoots up out of the water. And the crew of the Red October, still on the surface, they see this sub jump out of the water, and they recognize it as an American sub because of the shape. And they're like, oh, the captain chased the Americans out of the water. Because you got to remember, there's what's going on below the surface and what people who are witnessing what's going on above the surface, or on the surface, I should say. And it's important for this ploy, which suddenly went sour because this Russian submarine showed up to actually kill the Red October. So the torpedo is confused long enough that it starts going haywire and starts looking around for another target. Meanwhile, we jump back to the Red October, where Ryan is crawling over a catwalk, trying to make his way to where the saboteur is operating without being seen. And he does probably the best Sean Connery impersonation as he's crawling around. He's like, I mean, honestly, if you listen to that, I don't know that you couldn't tell that it wasn't Sean Connery. You closed your eyes. It's just so funny. He's like, oh, Ryan, don't shoot things. Don't react well to bullets. Yeah, like me, he says. It's hilarious. So he maneuvers himself over to where the guy is futzing around with the nuclear bomb. He gets the drop on him, and he sees he's like, you're just a cook. And this is where that ad I did a couple of weeks ago, where I forget who it was, sent me an ad request saying that he wanted Casey Ryback, the cook from Under Siege, and ships Cook's assistant Loganoff from the Red October to be in a movie together because they're both cooks and they're both trying to repel borders. It's great. So you're just a cook, and he's holding two wires apart from each other that presumably when he puts them together, the nuclear bomb's going to go off. So Ryan just blows the motherfucker away.
I love that Russian nukes are just, you can fire them by just pushing two wires together.
I guess so. So the cook is dead.
I'll give it to him.
Yeah, again, who knows? I don't know nuclear bombs or how Russian nuclear bombs work. So why not?
I just would hope they're a little more complicated. That's all I'm saying.
It's a little bit more complicated than that. So he kills the cooks. The saboteur is dead, but we still have the torpedo in the water. And the torpedo's going all over the place. And eventually what happens is the torpedo's coming straight at the Red October. The Russian sub is behind the Red October. The captain of the Dallas, also a cool customer, so to speak, he's playing chicken with the torpedo, and at the last second, he dives the boat, and the torpedo goes straight over him and flies right into the Russian submarine that was chasing him. And so it explodes, and on the surface of the water, there's this giant explosion that comes out of the water. Now, for anybody that's on the surface knows, all that they know is that there was an American sub and the Red October. The American sub's on the surface now, and the Red October, as far as I know, just blew up. So the cover-up of grabbing the Red October is even more complete with this situation than it was in the earlier iteration of just blowing up a torpedo and saying that it hit the hull. And that moves us into basically the end of the movie, where the National Security Advisor guy is talking to the Russian diplomat again. He's like, well, I'm glad all the crewers survived. You know, it'll be a long time before we can effect an effective investigation to try to recover the wreckage and figure out what went on. And the Russian ambassador guy says, well, there's another matter I need to discuss you with. We've lost contact with one of our submarines. And he's like, you lost another sub, ambassador. It's just like, because as far as we can tell, because in the movie's logic, not in logic, in the movie's logic, the Russian submarine that was the Hunter submarine, it was 7 hours behind the rest of the fleet. It went off on its own sort of mission by itself, out of contact with everybody else. So neither the Russians are sure where that sub went because they don't know that it engaged the Red October, I guess, because they never communicated back because of like radio silence and all that. So
well, not just radio silence. When you're when you're under like that, you can't send messages. So
that's true too. So they don't know what happened to that sub for sure. So yeah, the cover-up is done. The Red October is seized. It's all effectively over with. And then we have the ending where Ryan and Ramius are on the con of the sub as they're moving into a harbor in Maine somewhere where it'll be in dry dock. And they have this little deep, meaningful conversation about the why Ramius did it, and he gives his answer about how, you know, starting wars and I don't want to be part of that anymore. And he talked earlier, like Monkey said, about casualties without any battles, no monuments, nothing like that. It's all, you know, for naught, basically.
And the worst green screen in movie history.
Oh, man. Yeah, they got that blue filter up all over the place, and it is green screen to fuck. Now, again, given the era, given the time that this was made, I can forgive it. Because, you know, it's like, what else are you going to do? You don't actually have a real sub. You can't really put it out to water. And filming Dave.
Done.
What's that?
The sub coming in, yeah, you have to do it that way. But for filming the two of them, you could have put them on a boat in any river anywhere.
Well, the thing is,
you don't actually see the con tower as they're talking. They're just, you know, they're on it talking.
That's true.
So they could have faked that.
Well, the other thing, too, is that we know at the beginning of the movie they had some kind of mock-up of the con tower because, you know, Sean Connery and Sam Neill are standing right in it.
Yep.
So they had access to that. Why they couldn't have just filmed something, even if you had to make it day for night, even if you had to go to the lengths of just filming them out in that same body of water where they filmed Sam Neill and Sean Connery. Of course, I don't know that when they filmed, I mean, we see exposition shots of the sound and the harbor that they're in at the time. I don't know if they actually filmed it there with the actors. So anyway, they had something set up. They could have used that. Anyway, then the movie ends basically with Jack Ryan back on a plane, heading home, presumably. Although this time he's fast asleep because apparently he's gotten over his jitters after all this excitement. And next to him in the chair is a new teddy bear who is going to be the brother of Stanley, his daughter's teddy bear, which was mentioned way back at James Greer's.
Real quick, Jenna's leaving. Bye, Jenna. Happy birthday.
Bye, Jenna. Happy birthday.
We'll sing to you tomorrow.
And that is the end of the movie.
Yeah. As you guys mentioned, yes, I was very nitpicky about this because you kind of have to be if you're going to criticize anything. It's going to be very minor details because this is a really well done movie. And even I've said this with a lot of movies that we've done. It's like, even when I am critical of it, excuse me, I still love this movie. Oh, I'm sorry, your birthday. You said it was on Sunday. I thought you meant this Sunday. I apologize.
17th. Okay.
Her birthday's on the 17th. Okay, we'll remember that.
We'll wait a week. Okay.
Oh, but it's Ben's birthday. Happy birthday.
Oh, Ben Masta. Happy birthday.
We'll sing to you tomorrow. But yeah, there are parts of it. I can't say that this movie is absolutely perfect because, well, one, no movie ever is going to be. Mm-hmm. But it does have little flaws, and there's nothing wrong with pointing those out. If I recommended this movie to somebody and didn't mention that some of the visuals might make you throw up because they're so bad, that would be a reflection on me. That end scene, especially, they should have just had them sitting down in a living room. That would have been better than that shit. It was so bad.
Yeah,
so bad. And you're right. For the time, maybe it looked good. I don't ever remember not being startled by it, but I also don't remember the first time I saw this.
Okay. Yeah, I saw it in the theater way back when. I think I saw it with my dad, and I just remember being just so in awe of just everything in that movie. I didn't understand some of the nuances and anything at that point in my life, but at the same time, it was just such a it was an adult film, and I want to make the distinction here. It's not like porno. I'm talking it was an adult film. It didn't have a lot of violence. It didn't have a lot of swearing, but the subject matter and the way that the information was relayed and the situations as presented to the audience didn't talk down to you. And it all made sense, and it was great acting, great storytelling. The script was as tight as a drum for all intents and purposes, with a couple of minor exceptions. It was great, and for a guy who had done like Die Hard just a year or two before, it's an amazing sort of evolution from great action movie to great sort of drama slash thriller, especially on again with the politics and the gamesmanship on so many levels of this movie between individuals and nations and just the maneuvering of submarines. You want to talk about just like chess pieces on the board. You can go all types of like Inception on how many levels that played into how this movie operated. But yeah,
that's one of the reasons the scene where the plane drops the torpedo bothered me so much.
Okay.
This wasn't an action film, and that one seemed like it was thrown in just for the action of it. And I, like I said, I get it to show how cool he is, but we already saw that with him navigating this trench, because we didn't mention this, but he told them to speed up, and the Russians had a very specific time frame and speed you had to go to know exactly where to turn so you don't hit the walls. And he was pushing that, and he's sitting there like it was no big deal. So we already got that, and we didn't need it with that fucking. It just seemed to me like they threw it in because, we need something else exciting here. So I just don't like that scene. I don't like that scene.
I could see what you mean. I aside from that one maneuver, if they'd taken out the maneuvering scene and had the torpedo scene, you could have probably killed two birds with one stone. Shown how smart and aware he was of the orientation of just objects outside of the ship and the ship itself and everything, and also had an exciting scene.
Yeah, yeah.
You could have combined the two, I guess, maybe. But anyway.
But still, a great movie. Such a good movie.
Yes, great flick. Like I say, one of yeah, it is my favorite movie in the sense that I never get tired watching it. That's not to say I'm going to watch it every single day or something, but it's one of those movies that I made it a point when I have a copy now by happenstance, not by choice. I got somebody gave me their DVD collection at one point. It was in there, but I always said it was the one movie I would never buy a copy of, because if I knew I had a copy of it, I'd never watch it, because it's always there. There's no effort involved in going to get a copy. But now that video stores don't exist anymore, that's pretty much a moot point. So now having a copy is actually a benefit.
For me, this is one of those movies that I rarely seek it out.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's on, I cannot help but watch it.
Yeah.
Porn. Yes, porn, dear. Thank you. That's my girl. 1 second. For my absolute favorite movie ever is An Officer and a Gentleman, and I could literally watch that every day, and I do seek it out to watch it. This one, watching this made me want to watch Clear and Present Danger and Patriot Games, because I do love both of those movies as well.
Yes.
The Sum of All Fears is just shit.
Oh fuck! I was so upset. That's a whole other conversation, but I was so upset with what they did with Sum of All Fears, because that is honestly one of my favorite Tom Clancy books of all time. That and Without Remorse. If you ever want to read a novel that's basically The Punisher but written professionally, read Without Remorse. It is amazing. But anyway,
let's go through them. We had The Hunt for Red October,
yes.
Clear and Present Danger, Patriot Games, Sum of All Fears.
Patriot Games came before Clear and Present Danger.
Sorry, yeah.
Patriot Games, Clear and Present Danger, Sum of All Fears, which was a prequel, which makes no fucking sense. Right. Then you had like Jack Ryan, Shadow Agent or something with Chris Pine.
Yeah, with Captain Kirk.
Yeah, Captain Kirk, and it made no fucking sense. I never saw it. I never even wasted my time to watch it because I don't give a shit.
You should actually watch it. It's not that bad. It's not great, but it goes into what happened to him and everything. It's the backstory, and it is so much better than maybe it's because I had just watched The Sum of All Fears right before I saw Jack Ryan for the first time. Yeah. So maybe my expectations were just really lower.
Yeah,
but it's not that bad. You should check it out sometime.
Yeah, the Sum of All Fears book, I cannot recommend more highly. In fact, I would recommend more highly the audiobook. If you can get the audiobook of Sum of All Fears, read by David Ogden Stiers, who was Winchester on MASH. I mean, he was the voice for most of the original audiobooks of the Tom Clancy novels, and he does an amazing job. Although the reader for the Hunt for Red October audiobook was Richard Crenna, who was Rambo's commanding officer, whatever his name was in the Rambo movies.
We missed Reindeer Games, apparently.
Reindeer Games is not a Tom Clancy story. I don't know what you're talking about there. That's not a Tom Clancy book. I mean, Ben Affleck is in Reindeer Games, and he was in Sum of All Fears, but it's not a Tom Clancy story so far.
Yeah,
well,
apparently in that movie he plays somebody called Rudy Duncan. So.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just looked at it. I've never watched it. What was I going to say?
Well, we should talk about what we're going to do next week, because next week kicks off our Christmas series, so to speak.
Real quick, before we do that, Ben Masta says that people keep telling him to watch John Wick. John Wick is a dumb movie, but it is so fun to watch.
Yes, it is a lot of fun. As long as you don't go into it taking it seriously, it's just a cool movie. That's about all there is to it.
Yeah.
So somebody told me once that it is what The Punisher should have been. To a point, I can sort of see what they're saying, but it is its own thing. Did you ever see the movie Shoot 'Em Up with Clive Owen?
If I did,
it's an action spectacle. Let me put it that way. John Wick and John Wick 2 are action spectacles, very light on plot, but very high on action and just being cool while shooting people. That's kind of what John Wick is.
Yeah.
So.
John Wick, the story of it is dumb as fuck. I ranted and raved about this on stream one night just because it was so. Yeah, there you go. Spencer the Frostback says John Wick is porn for gun nuts. Yes,
yes,
it
there you
is.
Go. There you go. Yeah,
Midnight in Exile. Yeah, that's a good one too. John Wick is a lot like Max Payne video game. Absolutely.
Oh yeah. Oh God. Let's not talk about the Max Payne movie. Oh.
I never watched it because I didn't want the memory of the game to be fucked.
I did. The only upside to that movie is that the visuals are amazing. The movie is awful. Anyway.
So what we've decided to do, guys, since it is December, is for the next few movies, we're going to be doing Christmas movies, but not Christmas movies. We're going to be doing movies basically set at Christmas time, I guess is a better way to put it.
Sure.
Did you have any that you wanted to claim as your own?
Well, I see. I know you are a Die Hard and Lethal Weapon fanatic.
I am.
So I figured those two should be on your channel.
That works. Die Hard is the first Christmas movie I watch every year. I'm about to watch it. I'll be watching it sometime this week. So
okay,
let's do Die Hard next week, and
after that, I figured I'd take Gremlins after that.
I'm so glad you said that because yes, Gremlins is definitely one we have to do. And no one in chat just said The Ref, and you know what? Do you know if you have one?
You've totally broken up and roboted, Monkey. I can't.
I'm sorry.
I don't know if it's just me, but I couldn't hear anything you were saying for the last few seconds.
Sorry, no one in chat. That's actually their name. No one said The Ref, and it's one I've considered, but we've talked about this before. Doing comedy movies is so hard.
Yeah. It's hard to critique something that's trying to make you laugh, and also because it's not so much about the plot but the situation. And so it's kind of like, you know, there are some movies that ride the line a little bit. Running Scared was kind of like that too. But The Ref specifically is a straight out comedy. Also, I would feel offended to have to recommend to anyone a Kevin Spacey movie at this point in the history. I just have to say, I'm kidding. No, go watch.
Yeah, because
go watch Seven every day.
After Christmas, we will be doing The Negotiator at some point. If I have to mail you a copy of it, we are going to do The Negotiator.
I will try to find a copy between now and then. I thought my sister had one because she has always been, I don't know if she is right now, but she has always been a Kevin Spacey freakazoid. I could have sworn she had a copy on DVD. I thought I did too, but apparently I don't. So yes, I will try to find one for that. But yeah, so next week will be Die Hard on Monkey's channel. Week after that will be Gremlins on mine. And then probably Lethal Weapon over on Monkeys, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do after that. I forget how many weekends we have left before the end of the month. But anyway, any other closing thoughts, Monkey?
If you guys haven't seen this movie, watch it. I would definitely also recommend Patriot Games and what's the other one with Harrison Ford? I've said it like 4 times.
Clear and Present Danger.
Thank you, Clear and Present Danger. Don't watch The Sum of All Fears. That movie sucks.
Read the book. Read the book. Listen to the book, but do not watch the movie.
But I like the Jack Ryan character, and I love what they did in the first 3 movies, and then from there it's kind of iffy. So,
and as far as submarine movies go, if you like The Hunt for Red October, Crimson Tide and Das Boot are the other 2 you need to look up. Yes.
If you're going to recommend Das Boot, guys, this movie will kick your ass.
Yes.
Know that going that is such a hard movie to watch, but it is so good.
It is so good. Get as director's cut or super edition as you can of that film if you can find it.
You didn't like K-19?
We can talk about that another time. Guys, thank you so much for joining us as always. Hope you enjoyed the review. Again, one of my favorite movies, if not my favorite movie of all time, Hunt for Red October. Go see it if you haven't already. And Monkey, thank you for joining me. And I was honestly surprised you were as forgiving of this as you were, given your critiques of naval procedure of Under Siege. I was sure that was going to be the point on which we were going to have really big problems. But hey, I'll take this.
Before you go, Down Periscope, thank you, Jim Healis. That is a fucking excellent movie.
Yes, Down Periscope with Kelsey Grammer.
If anybody in the actual Navy would lose their fucking mind watching it, but it is absolutely good. Sorry.
Yes, and welcome aboard. Anyway, guys, thanks again. We will see you next week with Die Hard. Take care, and an early happy holidays. I'll be politically correct. Happy holidays, whatever it is that you celebrate. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.